Let's get more reaction now to last night's events. Joining me from New Jersey is writer for Slate magazine, Aymann Ismail, who was at the Capitol building. Hello to you, Aymann. Whereabouts were you? And just describe for us what unfolded around you.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I am still in shock. I had gotten home last night very, very late, so I'm sorry if I'm going to sound a little drowsy, but I had gone to the Ellipse Park at 9 a.m. yesterday morning to document the, Stop the Steal parade, march, whatever you want to call it. And I was there when Trump asked his supporters to go to the Capitol building and take their country back, right? So I followed them for the 20 blocks that it would take to get there. And it, for the most part, was weirdly calm. It felt like I was at Comic-Con, people dressed up as their favorite characters that they'd seen on TV. But obviously, as soon as we got to the Capitol building, that's when things started looking very, very grim. That's when I started seeing Trump supporters attacking journalists, bullying them. I saw them smashing windows, breaking into the Capitol building, shoving police officers, desecrating one of the most important buildings in the country. And quite frankly, as a reporter, you sort of just need to stay in the moment and be aware so you don't get hurt and make sure you're doing your job correctly. But in the back of my mind, I was in shock. I couldn't believe what I was seeing.
And what about inside the building, Aymann?
The inside the building was a mess. There were hundreds of protesters going in and out. There was some police presence, but for the most part, they were docile. They didn't respond to any of the violence. They didn't respond to anybody breaking anything. They tried to shut the doors. And I've reported on tons and tons and tons of protests all over the country and even outside the country. And I've never seen police so restrained. And if you ask me, that's what the story is here today. The police did not intervene. They were unprepared. Someone has to be held accountable. But, people were going in, going out, taking things, rummaging through things, breaking things at their own will. And the police, for the most part, stood by and watched.
And this protest didn't come as a surprise. It had been long talked about. It was much planned. All week we've been hearing about protesters planning to descend on the Capitol. So how were the police so unprepared as you saw it?
That's right. One would think that they had the most sophisticated counterterrorism measures in play. People use, ISIS tweets, and what they say on social media networks is intel. But here we have Trump supporters making their plans to have a hostile takeover of the Capitol building public. They were very, very transparent about what they were planning. They were calling it the Second American Revolution. Yet the police were so ill prepared. They weren't even dressed in riot gear when the thousands of Trump supporters first descended on the Capitol building campus. It's astonishing. It blows my mind. I've covered Black Lives Matter protests here this summer, and police were already in riot gear, in some cases outnumbering the protesters. This was night and day, and I could only have my own suspicions as to why that was the case, but for the sake of trying to stay objective, I'll keep it to myself.
From the way you describe it, that there were two very distinct halves. You've written about inside the building, those more interested in taking selfies with various props that they found inside, versus the very much more aggressive rioters.
That's right. I would say the makeup of the protesters were honestly mostly cheerful. Like, they were happy to be there. They were celebrating. People were playing music on their loudspeakers. I'm pretty sure I was hearing the Immigrant Song by Led Zeppelin, which is a little ironic, but it's a good song. People were there to celebrate. People brought their children. There were children inside that building. It was, one of the interactions that I think that will stick with me is I talked to this teenager. He must have been 17, 18 years old, from Florida. And he described himself and the protesters there as peaceful. And I said, look in front of your eyes. What do you see? They're breaking the glass. They're kicking in the windows and jumping into the Capitol building. That's violence, right? He's like, yeah, I guess so, but it's not as bad as what Antifa does. You know, I don't think that they fully understand what they were doing. And to some degree, you have to lay blame with the police officers. They were letting them in. They were letting them in. I mean, I could see that there was some effort to maintain and keep people out, maintain a perimeter, but they were so overwhelmed that there was just nothing that they could do except let them in. So, it's not surprising to me that some people who were inside were taking their time, going in, looking around, taking pictures, leaving, coming back inside, taking more pictures, celebrating, leaving, going back inside. It was for several hours a lawless place.
Yeah, and that is the key, isn't it? The amount of time that it took to regain some kind of control. Aymann Ismail, thank you very much indeed for getting up so early and talking to us here on Sky News.